A homeless black girl finds a billionaire unconscious with his child washed ashore. And then, unimaginable happened. The ocean had stolen everything from 12-year-old Kaia Solace, but this morning, it was about to give her back something she never knew she needed. Dawn crept across Driftwood Cove like a whispered secret, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. The beach stretched empty except for the debris the tide had surrendered, tangled kelp, broken shells, and the occasional treasure that kept Kaia alive. She moved like a shadow across the sand, her bare feet silent, her dark eyes scanning for anything the wealthy tourists might have dropped or the sea might have offered. Her stomach gnawed at itself, a familiar companion she'd learned to ignore. The torn backpack slung over her shoulder contained everything she owned: a water bottle with a crack down one side, a knife with a loose handle, 3 crumpled dollar bills, and a photograph so worn the faces had nearly disappeared. She touched the photo through the fabric, a habit that brought no comfort but one she couldn't break. "Come on," she whispered to the waves, her breath visible in the morning chill. "Give me something good today." Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and how this story touched you. The wind whipped her hair, thick, dark coils that she'd learned to braid tight to keep them from her face. Her clothes hung loose on her small frame. Jeans with holes that weren't fashionable, a hoodie that had once been red but had faded to the color of dried blood, and sneakers held together with duct tape and determination. Kaia had been working this beach for 8 months, ever since she'd aged out of the last foster home that would take her. She knew every rock, every tide pool, every hiding spot where the Coast Guard couldn't find her when they came looking. She knew which tourists dropped the most change, which restaurants threw out food that was still good, and which shop owners would call the police if they saw her lingering too long. What she didn't know was that 3 miles offshore, a 42-year-old man named Caspian Blackwood was fighting for his life. The yacht Celeste's dream had been his sanctuary, the one place where the weight of running a billion-dollar empire couldn't reach him. Named for his wife, dead now for 2 years, it was where he came to remember what it felt like to breathe. Tonight, he'd brought his 8-year-old daughter Sage, hoping the ocean might wash away the distance that had grown between them like a cancer. "Daddy, look!" Sage had called from the bow, her small hands gripping the rail as dolphins raced alongside them. Her blonde hair caught the moonlight, and for a moment, Caspian saw Celeste in her smile. The resemblance was so strong it made his chest ache. "I see them, sweetheart," he'd said, but his voice carried the distraction that had become his default. Even here, even with her, his mind wandered to board meetings, stock prices, the endless demands of a company that had grown too large for one man to carry. Sage had turned to him then, her blue eyes, Celeste's eyes, searching his face. "Are you sad again, Daddy?" The question hit him like a physical blow. How did she know? How could an 8-year-old see what he worked so hard to hide? "No, baby. Daddy's just tired." But she'd already turned away, her shoulders small and defeated. Another moment lost. Another chance to connect that he'd let slip through his fingers like water. The storm had come from nowhere, as they often did in these waters. One moment the sea was calm, the next it was a living thing, hungry and violent. Caspian had tried to get them to safety, but the waves were too strong, the wind too fierce. The last thing he remembered was Sage's scream as the yacht tilted, the terrible sound of wood splintering, and the cold shock of water closing over his head. Now, as Kaia picked her way across the beach, she hummed under her breath, a song her brother Phoenix used to sing when the nights got too cold or the hunger too sharp. The melody was all she had left of him, and she guarded it like a secret. She paused near a cluster of rocks where the waves had deposited a particularly promising pile of seaweed. Sometimes jewelry got tangled in the kelp, rings or earrings lost by swimmers who ventured too close to the rocks. She'd found a gold bracelet once, sold it for enough money to eat for a week. But today, the seaweed held something different. A flash of silver caught her eye. Not jewelry, but fabric. Expensive fabric, the kind that didn't belong on this beach. Kaia's pulse quickened. Rich people meant rich things, and rich things meant survival for another day. She pushed through the kelp, following the silver thread, and that's when she saw them. A man lay face down in the sand, his dark hair matted with seaweed, his expensive suit torn and waterlogged. One arm was wrapped protectively around a small bundle. A child, Kaia realized with a jolt. A little girl with blonde hair, so still she might have been sleeping. Kaia's first instinct was to run. Dead bodies meant police, and police meant questions she couldn't answer. But something held her frozen, the way the man's arm curved around the child, even unconscious, even half-drowned, still trying to protect her. She'd seen that kind of love before. Phoenix had held her the same way during the worst nights, when the cold bit through their cardboard shelter and the older kids tried to take what little they had. "Hey!" she called out, her voice barely audible over the crash of waves. "Hey, mister!" No response. The man's face was turned away from her, pressed into the sand. The child, she couldn't be more than 8 or 9, was so pale her lips looked blue. Kaia's hands shook as she approached. She'd seen death before, had learned to recognize its stillness, its terrible quiet. But as she knelt beside them, she caught something, the faintest rise and fall of the man's back. He was breathing. Barely, but breathing. "Oh God," she whispered, the words torn from her throat. "Oh God, you're alive." She reached for the child first, her small hands surprisingly gentle as she checked for a pulse. There, weak but steady. Relief flooded through her so suddenly her knees nearly gave out. But relief was a luxury she couldn't afford. The tide was coming in, and if she didn't move them soon, the ocean would finish what it had started. Kaia looked around desperately. The beach was empty. It always was this early. Mama Cordelia's cafe wouldn't open for another hour, and the Coast Guard station was too far away. It was just her, 2 strangers, and the relentless advance of the sea. She grabbed the man's shoulder and shook him, harder than she'd ever touched another person. "Wake up! You have to wake up!" His head lolled to the side, revealing a face that was handsome even in unconsciousness. Strong jaw, dark stubble, the kind of features that belonged on magazine covers. But it was the expression that caught her, even in sleep. Pain. The same bone-deep exhaustion she saw in her own reflection. "Your little girl needs you," she said, her voice breaking. "Please. I can't carry you both." For a moment, nothing. Then his eyelids fluttered, and a sound escaped his lips. Not quite a word, but close enough to hope. "That's it," Kaia urged, shaking him again. "Come on. Stay with me." His eyes opened, gray like storm clouds, and fixed on her face with startling intensity. His lips moved, forming a single word that made Kaia's heart stop. "Sage." The way he said it, desperate, broken, full of love and terror, told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't just any child. This was his daughter. His world. And somehow, impossibly, their survival had become her responsibility. The waves crept closer, foam licking at their feet. Kaia looked at the unconscious girl, Sage, and made a choice that would change all their lives forever. "Okay," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Okay. I've got you both." She didn't know how. She didn't know if she was strong enough, smart enough, brave enough. All she knew was that the ocean had taken Phoenix from her, and she'd be damned if she'd let it take anyone else. Not today. Not on her watch. What do you think drives someone to risk everything for strangers? Have you ever felt that pull to help, even when it might cost you? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your stories inspire me. The next 10 minutes would either save 3 lives or destroy them all. Kaia had never performed CPR on a real person, only on the plastic dummy at the community center during the 1 week she'd attended their life skills program before aging out. But as she knelt beside Sage's motionless form, muscle memory kicked in with desperate precision. "Come on, baby girl," she whispered, tilting Sage's head back and checking her airway. Seawater trickled from the corner of the child's mouth, and Kaia's stomach lurched. "Don't you dare give up on me." She placed her hands on Sage's chest, so small, so fragile, and began compressions. 1, 2, 3. The rhythm felt wrong, too fast, but panic was driving her now. Sage's skin was cold as marble, her lips the color of winter sky. "Breathe," Kaia commanded, sealing her mouth over Sage's and forcing air into her lungs. The taste of salt water and fear filled her mouth, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. "Breathe, damn it!" Behind her, Caspian stirred, his consciousness flickering like a dying flame. Through the haze of near-drowning and hypothermia, he heard something that cut through everything else. A young voice, fierce and desperate, fighting for his daughter's life. "Who?" He tried to speak, but only managed to croak. His vision swam, but he could make out a small figure hunched over Sage. Dark hands pressed against his daughter's chest with the intensity of someone who understood loss. Kaia didn't hear him. Her world had narrowed to this moment, this breath, this heartbeat she was trying to restart. She'd lost Phoenix to water just like this, watched helplessly as the current pulled him under while she screamed from the shore, too small, too weak, too late. "Not again. Never again. Come back," she sobbed between compressions, her tears mixing with the salt spray. "Your daddy's calling for you. Can't you hear him?" He said your name like it was the only word that mattered. 15 compressions. 2 breaths. 15 compressions. 2 breaths. Her arms burned, her lungs ached, but she kept going. The waves were getting closer now, foam reaching for their feet like grasping fingers. Then, a cough. Weak, barely audible, but unmistakably alive. Sage's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused, but brilliantly, beautifully blue. Seawater spilled from her lips as she gasped, her small body convulsing as her lungs remembered how to work. "That's it!" Kaia cried, rolling Sage onto her side as more water came up. "Get it all out, sweetheart. You're okay. You're going to be okay." Sage's gaze found Kaia's face, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or gratitude, or the simple acknowledgement of one soul saving another. Her lips moved, forming a word so soft Kaia had to lean close to hear it. "Angel!" The word hit Kaia like a physical blow. No one had ever called her that. No one had ever looked at her like she was anything other than a problem to be solved or a burden to be carried. But in Sage's eyes, she saw something she'd never seen before: wonder, trust, love at first sight. "No, baby," Kaia whispered, brushing wet hair from Sage's forehead. "Just Kaia. I'm just Kaia." But Sage smiled, a weak, watery smile that transformed her pale face into something luminous. "Kaia," she repeated, like she was testing the name, making it hers. "Pretty." Behind them, Caspian was struggling to sit up, his expensive suit ruined, his usually perfect hair hanging in dark tangles. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were fixed on his daughter with an intensity that made Kaia's chest tight. "Sage," he breathed, and the love in that single word was so raw, so desperate, it made Kaia look away. She'd never heard her own name spoken like that. Never would. "She's okay," Kaia said quickly, helping Sage sit up. She swallowed some water, but she's breathing. "We need to get you both warm and—" "You saved her." Caspian's voice was hoarse, broken, but certain. He was looking at Kaia now, really looking, and she felt exposed under his gaze. "You saved my daughter." Kaia shrugged, uncomfortable with the weight of his gratitude. "Anyone would have." "No." He struggled to his knees, swaying slightly. "Not anyone. You did. You." His voice cracked. "How old are you?" The question caught her off guard. Adults usually asked her age when they were about to tell her what she couldn't do, where she couldn't go, why she didn't belong. 12, she said defensively. "But I'm not 12. He said it like he couldn't believe it. "You're 12 years old, and you just performed CPR on my daughter. Where did you learn?" "It doesn't matter." Kaia was already pulling back, the familiar walls slamming into place. She'd done what needed doing, but that didn't mean she belonged in their world. You need to get to a hospital. Both of you. There's a cafe up the beach. Mama Cordelia will call an ambulance. She started to stand, but Sage's small hand caught her wrist. The touch was gentle but insistent, and when Kaia looked down, those blue eyes were wide with something that looked like panic. "Don't go," Sage whispered. "Please don't go." The words were a knife to Kaia's heart. How many times had she said the same thing? To social workers, to foster parents, to Phoenix before the water took him? Don't go. Please don't go. As if wanting something badly enough could make it stay. "I have to," Kaia said softly. "Your daddy will take care of you now. That's what daddies do." But even as she said it, she saw something flicker across Caspian's face. Guilt, maybe, or shame. The look of a man who knew he'd been failing at the one job that mattered most. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly. "Your full name." Kaia hesitated. Names had power. Once someone knew your name, they could find you, track you, drag you back to places you'd fought to escape. But something in his voice, not authority, but genuine curiosity, made her answer. "Kaia Solace." Solace. He repeated it slowly, like he was tasting it. That's perfect. Why? Because that's what you are. What you've given us." He reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped himself. Solace. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Kaia felt something shifting inside her chest, a crack in the armor she'd built around her heart. This man, this stranger, was looking at her like she mattered. Like she was more than just a street kid who'd happened to be in the right place at the right time. But the waves were still coming, and reality was a cold, relentless thing. "We need to move," she said, breaking the spell. "The tide's coming in fast." Caspian nodded, trying to stand. His legs buckled immediately, and Kaia caught his arm without thinking. He was heavier than she'd expected, solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric, but she braced herself and held on. "Easy," she said. "You probably have hypothermia. And maybe a concussion. Can you walk?" "I think so." But his voice was uncertain, and when he took a step, he swayed dangerously. Kaia looked between him and Sage, calculating distances and possibilities. The cafe was half a mile up the beach. Sage was conscious but weak. Caspian was barely standing. And the tide was coming in fast. "Okay," she said, making another choice that would bind their fates together. "New plan. Sage, can you hold on to my back?" The little girl nodded, and Kaia knelt down, letting Sage climb on piggyback style. She was lighter than expected, all bird bones and trust, her small arms wrapping around Kaia's neck like she'd been doing it her whole life. "And you," Kaia said to Caspian, "lean on me. We're going to take this slow and steady." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm telling." There was steel in her voice now, the tone of someone who'd learned to take charge when adults failed. "Your daughter needs medical attention, and you're in no shape to carry her. So we do this together, or we don't do it at all." Caspian stared at her for a long moment, this fierce, impossible child who'd appeared from nowhere to save his world. Then he nodded and let her take some of his weight. They made their way up the beach like that, a strange, stumbling family bound together by salt water and desperation. Sage's breath was warm against Kaia's neck, and she hummed softly, the same song Phoenix used to sing. Behind them, the waves erased their footprints, washing away all evidence of the miracle that had just occurred. But some things, once they happen, can never be undone. Some rescues save more than just lives. They save souls, hearts, futures that seemed impossible just moments before. As they crested the dune that led to Mama Cordelia's cafe, Sage whispered something in Kaia's ear that would echo in her heart for years to come. "I knew you'd find us. I dreamed about you." And for the first time in her 12 years of life, Kaia Solace began to believe that maybe, just maybe, She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Mama Cordelia's seaside cafe sat like a weathered lighthouse against the morning sky, its blue paint peeling and windows fogged with steam from the coffee pot that never stopped brewing. The old woman who ran it had seen everything the ocean could offer: storms and shipwrecks, lovers and lost souls, miracles and tragedies washed up with the tide. But she'd never seen anything quite like this. "Sweet Jesus," Cordelia breathed as the strange trio stumbled through her door, setting off the brass bell that announced all arrivals. She was a woman built for comfort rather than speed, with silver hair wrapped in a colorful headscarf and hands that had kneaded a million biscuits. But she moved with surprising quickness as she took in the scene: a well-dressed man barely standing, a small blonde child clinging to the back of what looked like a homeless girl. "Call 911, Kaia said without preamble, helping Caspian into the nearest booth. "Possible drowning victims. They need an ambulance." Cordelia was already reaching for the phone, but her eyes stayed fixed on Kaia. She knew this child, had seen her picking through the dumpster behind the cafe more than once, had left day-old pastries where she might find them. But she'd never seen her like this: commanding, responsible, fierce with purpose. "What happened, baby girl?" Cordelia asked as she dialed, her voice gentle but urgent. "Yacht accident, I think," Kaia said, sliding Sage off her back and into the booth beside her father. "Found them washed up on the South Beach. The little girl wasn't breathing when I found her." Sage immediately curled into Caspian's side, her small body shaking with cold and shock. He wrapped his arms around her, and for a moment, his composure cracked completely. His shoulders shook with silent sobs as the reality of how close he'd come to losing her hit him full force. "Daddy!" Sage's voice was small, confused. "Why are you crying?" "Because I love you," he whispered into her hair. "Because I love you so much, and I almost—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy with all the things that might have been. Kaia watched this display of raw emotion with something that felt like hunger. When was the last time someone had held her like that? When was the last time someone had cried because they almost lost her? The answer was never, and the knowledge sat in her chest like a stone. "Ambulance is on the way," Cordelia announced, hanging up the phone. "Should be here in 10 minutes. She bustled toward the kitchen, already pulling blankets from a closet. "Let me get you some hot coffee, some soup." "I should go," Kaia said suddenly, backing toward the door. The walls of the cafe felt like they were closing in, the warmth and kindness suffocating after so many months of cold indifference. "They're safe now. They don't need—" "Wait." Caspian's voice stopped her mid-step. He was looking at her with those storm-gray eyes, and she could see him trying to process what had happened, trying to understand how a homeless child had become his daughter's savior. "Please, don't go yet." But Kaia was already shaking her head, her hand on the door handle. "I did what I could. The rest isn't my problem." The words came out harsher than she'd intended, but they were necessary. Distance was survival. Attachment was danger. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, and she wouldn't forget it now, no matter how those blue eyes looked at her like she hung the moon. "Kaia!" Sage's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through everything else. "Please." The please was what undid her. Not the tears, not the gratitude, but that simple word spoken with such trust, such certainty that Kaia was someone worth asking to stay. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Kaia let her hand fall from the door. "Just until the ambulance comes," she said, more to herself than to them. "Then I'm gone." Cordelia appeared with blankets and steaming mugs, wrapping Sage and Caspian in warmth while studying Kaia with knowing eyes. "You look like you could use some warming up too, child." "I'm fine," Kaia said automatically, but she was shivering in her wet clothes, her lips tinged blue with cold. "Stubborn as a mule," Cordelia muttered, but there was affection in it. She draped a blanket around Kaia's shoulders anyway, ignoring her protests. "Sit down before you fall down." Reluctantly, Kaia perched on the edge of a chair across from the booth, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. She watched as Cordelia fussed over Sage, checking her pulse, feeling her forehead, making the kind of gentle, worried sounds that mothers made. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Cordelia asked Sage, who was slowly warming up under the blankets. "Sage Blackwood," the little girl replied, then looked at Kaia. "And that's Kaia. She saved me. She breathed life back into me." The way she said it, like Kaia had performed some kind of miracle, made everyone in the room go quiet. Caspian's eyes found Kaia's across the table, and she saw something there that made her stomach twist. Gratitude, yes, but something deeper. Something that looked dangerously like hope. "Blackwood," Cordelia repeated slowly, her eyebrows rising. "As in Blackwood Enterprises? The shipping company." Caspian nodded, and Kaia saw him straighten slightly, slipping back into the role of successful businessman even while wrapped in a cafe blanket. "I'm Caspian Blackwood. This is my daughter, Sage." The name meant nothing to Kaia, but she could see it meant something to Cordelia. The older woman's expression shifted, becoming more formal, more careful. Rich people, Kaia realized. Really rich people. Which made this whole situation even more impossible. "Well, Mr. Blackwood," Cordelia said, her voice taking on a different tone. "You're very lucky this young lady found you when she did." "I know," Caspian said quietly, his eyes still on Kaia. "More lucky than I deserve." There was something in his voice, guilt, maybe, or regret, that made Kaia look at him more closely. He was handsome, she supposed, in the way that rich men usually were. Well-groomed, well-dressed, even soaking wet, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about where your next meal was coming from. But there were shadows under his eyes, lines around his mouth that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. And the way he held Sage, like she might disappear if he loosened his grip, told a story of loss that Kaia recognized. "The yacht," she said suddenly. "What happened?" Caspian's jaw tightened. "Storm came out of nowhere. I was trying to get us back to shore, but the waves were too strong. The boat capsized about 3 miles out." He paused, his voice dropping. "I remember hitting the water, grabbing Sage, and then, nothing until I woke up on the beach." "You held on to her," Kaia said. "The whole time. Even unconscious, you never let go." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or wonder. "I did." "Your arm was wrapped around her like a shield. That's probably what kept her alive long enough for me to find you." Sage looked up at her father with new eyes, and Caspian seemed to see himself differently too. For a moment, the guilt in his expression eased, replaced by something that might have been pride. The sound of sirens cut through the moment, growing louder as they approached. Kaia tensed, every muscle in her body preparing for flight. Sirens meant authorities, and authorities meant questions she couldn't answer. "I have to go," she said, standing abruptly. "No!" Sage's cry was sharp with panic. "You can't go. What if something happens? What if I need you?" "You won't," Kaia said, but her voice was gentler now. "You have your daddy. He'll take care of you. But what if he can't?" The question came out small and scared, and Kaia realized that Sage had her own fears, her own doubts about the man who was supposed to protect her. Caspian flinched as if he'd been slapped. "Sage, You're always working," Sage said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "You're always sad and far away, and I thought maybe if we went on the boat, maybe you'd come back. But then the storm came, and I was so scared, and now Kaia's leaving too, and—" "Hey!" Kaia knelt beside the booth, her voice cutting through Sage's rising panic. "Look at me, sweetheart." Sage's blue eyes, so much like her father's, fixed on Kaia's face. "Your daddy loves you," Kaia said firmly. "I can see it in the way he looks at you, the way he held on to you even when he was unconscious. Sometimes grown-ups get lost in their sadness, but that doesn't mean they love you any less." She glanced at Caspian, who was staring at her with something like amazement. "And sometimes," she continued, They need someone to remind them what's really important. The sirens were getting closer now, and Kaia could see the flashing lights through the cafe windows. Her time was running out. "I have to go," she said again, but this time she reached out and touched Sage's hand. "But I want you to remember something, okay? You're brave. Braver than you know. And you're loved. Don't ever forget that." Sage's fingers closed around hers, small and warm and desperate. "Will I see you again?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Kaia looked at this little girl who'd somehow crawled into her heart in the space of an hour, then at the man who was watching them both with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'll never forget you. Either of you." The ambulance pulled up outside, and paramedics began unloading equipment. Kaia gently extracted her hand from Sage's grip and headed for the back door of the cafe. "Kaia!" Caspian's voice stopped her one more time. When she turned, he was standing, swaying slightly but determined. "Thank you. For everything. I don't know how to." "You don't have to," she said simply. "Just be there for her. Really be there. That's all she wants." And then she was gone, slipping out the back door like smoke, leaving behind only the lingering scent of salt water and the echo of a name that would haunt them both. Solace. Inside the cafe, as paramedics swarmed around them, Sage pressed her face to the window, searching for any sign of the girl who'd saved her life. But Kaia had vanished as suddenly as she'd appeared, leaving only questions and the terrible certainty that their story was far from over. "Where did she go, Daddy?" Sage whispered. Caspian put his arm around his daughter and stared out at the empty beach. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I'm going to find her." It was a promise that would change everything. Driftwood Cove General Hospital smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, its fluorescent lights casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Caspian sat in the emergency room waiting area, his expensive suit replaced by hospital scrubs that hung loose on his frame. Sage was in the pediatric ward, stable but under observation for potential complications from near drowning. He should have been relieved. Should have been making phone calls to his assistant, his board of directors, the Coast Guard about the yacht. Should have been handling the crisis with the cold efficiency that had built his empire. Instead, he couldn't stop thinking about a 12-year-old girl with fierce eyes and gentle hands who disappeared into the morning like she'd never existed at all. "Mr. Blackwood?" A nurse approached with a clipboard. "We need to complete some paperwork for your daughter's admission." Caspian nodded, taking the forms with hands that still trembled slightly. Insurance information, emergency contacts, medical history. All the bureaucratic details that reduced a life to checkboxes and signatures. He was halfway through the forms when he heard a commotion near the reception desk. "I don't care what your policy is," a familiar voice was saying, sharp with frustration. "She needs to be seen by a doctor." Caspian looked up to see Kaia standing at the reception desk, her wet clothes exchanged for an oversized hospital gown that made her look even smaller than she was. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were angry red marks on her arms that looked suspiciously like rope burns. "Miss, as I've explained," the receptionist said with barely concealed irritation, "without insurance or a guardian present, we can only provide emergency care. And since you're not experiencing a life-threatening emergency..." "How do you know what I'm experiencing?" Kaia shot back. "You're not a doctor. Are you experiencing chest pain? Difficulty breathing? Severe bleeding?" Kaia's jaw tightened. "No, but..." "Then you'll need to wait for the free clinic to open on Thursday, or find someone to guarantee payment for your visit." Caspian watched this exchange with growing anger. The receptionist was treating Kaia like she was less than human, her tone suggesting that poverty was somehow contagious. He stood up, the clipboard forgotten. "Excuse me," he said, approaching the desk. "Is there a problem here?" The receptionist's demeanor changed instantly when she saw him. The expensive watch he'd retrieved from his belongings, the way he carried himself despite the hospital scrubs. "Oh, Mr. Blackwood. No problem at all. This young lady was just..." This young lady, Caspian interrupted, saved my daughter's life this morning. Whatever medical care she needs, I'll cover it. Kaia spun around, her eyes wide with surprise and something that might have been panic. I don't need your charity. It's not charity, Caspian said quietly. It's gratitude. I told you I'm fine. But even as she said it, Caspian could see she wasn't. There was a pallor to her skin that went beyond cold, and the way she held her left arm suggested injury. More than that, there was something in her eyes, a wariness that spoke of too many doors slammed in her face, too many people who'd looked right through her. Kaia! He said her name gently, the way he might speak to a wounded animal. What happened to your arms? She glanced down at the rope burns, then quickly pulled the hospital gown sleeves down to cover them. Nothing. Just. I had to climb down from where I was sleeping. The rope was old. The lie was obvious, but Caspian didn't call her on it. Instead, he turned to the receptionist. Please put Miss Solace's treatment on my account. Whatever she needs. Sir, I can't authorize. Then get someone who can. There was steel in his voice now, the tone that had closed billion-dollar deals and intimidated boardrooms full of powerful men. Now! The receptionist scurried away, and Caspian turned back to Kaia, who was staring at him with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. Why? She asked simply. Because you saved my daughter. Because you're hurt. Because it's the right thing to do. He paused, studying her face. Because I have a feeling you don't let people help you very often. Kaia's laugh was bitter. People don't usually offer. Then they're idiots. The simple statement, delivered without pity or condescension, seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment, her defensive walls wavered, and Caspian caught a glimpse of the scared, lonely child beneath the fierce exterior. Mr. Blackwood? A doctor approached, clipboard in hand. I'm Dr. Martinez. I've been treating your daughter. Caspian's attention immediately shifted. How is she? Stable. Very lucky, actually. A few more minutes in the water and we might be having a very different conversation. Dr. Martinez glanced at Kaia. I understand this young lady performed CPR? She did. Well, she saved your daughter's life. Textbook CPR, from what I can tell. Where did you learn that? He asked Kaia directly. Kaia shrugged. Community center class. Figured it might be useful someday. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. We're going to keep Sage overnight for observation, just to be safe. There's always a risk of secondary drowning with cases like this. Caspian felt his chest tighten. Secondary drowning? Water in the lungs can cause delayed complications. It's rare, but we like to be cautious. She'll be monitored closely. Dr. Martinez turned to Kaia. And I understand you need some medical attention as well? It's nothing serious, Kaia said quickly. Let me be the judge of that. Room 3 is available. As Dr. Martinez led Kaia away, she glanced back at Caspian. Your daughter, can I see her? Just for a minute. Of course, Caspian said. I'll take you up after the doctor looks at your arms. An hour later, they stood outside Sage's room in the pediatric ward. Through the window, they could see her sleeping peacefully, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like spun gold. Monitors beeped softly, tracking her vital signs, and N4 drip-fed fluids into her small arm. She looks so little, Kaia whispered, her breath fogging the glass. She is little, Caspian said. Too little to have gone through what she did today. But she's strong. Stronger than you think. Kaia's voice was certain. She fought to come back. I could feel it when I was doing CPR. She wasn't ready to give up. Caspian looked at this strange, fierce child who seemed to understand his daughter better than he did. How do you know? Because I recognize the fight in her. It's the same fight I have. Kaia's hand pressed against the glass. The fight to survive when everything's trying to pull you under. The words hit Caspian like a physical blow. He thought about Sage's question on the yacht. "Are you sad again, Daddy?" And realized that his daughter had been fighting her own battle, trying to reach him through the wall of grief and guilt he'd built around himself. "I've been a terrible father," he said quietly. "No," Kaia said firmly. "You've been a hurt father. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I almost lost the most important thing in my life because I was too wrapped up in my own pain to pay attention." Kaia turned to look at him, and he was surprised by the understanding in her young eyes. What happened to her mother? The question was direct, without the careful dancing around the subject that most adults did. Caspian found himself answering honestly. "Cancer. 2 years ago. Sage was only 6 when Celeste died." His voice cracked slightly on his wife's name. "I thought I was protecting her by not talking about it, by trying to keep things normal. But I think I just made everything worse." "Grief isn't something you protect people from," Kaia said softly. "It's something you share so it doesn't eat you alive." "You sound like you know something about that." Kaia's expression shuddered slightly. "Everyone knows something about loss." Before Caspian could ask what she meant, a nurse appeared. "Mr. Blackwood, your daughter is awake and asking for you. Both of you, actually." They entered the room quietly, and Sage's face lit up when she saw them. "Kaia, you came back." "Just for a visit," Kaia said, moving to the bedside. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Tired. And my chest hurts a little. But the doctor says I'm going to be okay." Sage reached for Kaia's hand. "Are you okay? You look different." Kaia was wearing clean clothes now, jeans and a sweater that the hospital social worker had provided from their emergency supply. Her rope burns were bandaged, and someone had helped her wash the salt from her hair. She looked younger somehow, more like the 12-year-old she actually was. "I'm fine," Kaia said. "The doctors fixed me right up." "Good." Sage's grip on her hand tightened. "I was scared you were hurt and no one would help you." The simple statement revealed so much about what Sage had observed in their brief time together. This little girl, despite her own trauma, was worried about someone else's well-being. It was a kindness that seemed to run in the family, Caspian realized, thinking of how Sage had immediately trusted Kaia despite being a stranger. "Where do you live?" Sage asked suddenly. "Can we visit you when I get out of the hospital?" Kaia's expression became carefully neutral. "I move around a lot. It's hard to say where I'll be." "But you have to live somewhere," Sage pressed with the logic of childhood. "Everyone lives somewhere." "Sage," Caspian said gently, recognizing Kaia's discomfort. "Maybe we shouldn't." "It's okay," Kaia said. She looked at Sage seriously. "I don't have a house like you do. I stay in different places, sometimes shelters, sometimes other places. It's complicated." Sage's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You don't have a family?" "No," Kaia said simply. "Not anymore." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken questions and impossible wishes. Sage looked between Kaia and her father, her young mind clearly working through possibilities that the adults couldn't voice. "That's not fair," Sage said finally, her voice fierce with indignation. "Everyone should have a family." "Life isn't always fair, sweetheart," Kaia said gently. "But that doesn't mean it's not worth living." Caspian watched this exchange with a growing ache in his chest. Here was his daughter, showing more emotional intelligence and compassion than he'd given her credit for. And here was Kaia, wise beyond her years, teaching them both about resilience and hope. "I have an idea," Sage said suddenly, her eyes bright with excitement. "Kaia could stay with us. We have lots of rooms, and Daddy's always saying the house is too quiet." "Sage," Caspian said carefully, "it's not that simple." "Why not?" Sage looked between them with the innocent certainty of a child who believed all problems had solutions. Kaia saved my life. Now we can save hers." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Kaia's face had gone carefully blank, but Caspian could see the longing she was trying to hide. And in his daughter's eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in 2 years: hope. Real, bright, transformative hope. What would you do if a child offered you the one thing you'd always wanted but never thought you deserved? Sometimes the most unexpected families are the ones that heal us most. Share your thoughts below. Have you ever found family in the most unlikely places? "It's a beautiful idea, sweetheart," Caspian said slowly, "but Kaia has her own life, her own choices to make." "Do I?" Kaia asked quietly, and there was something vulnerable in her voice that made them both look at her more closely. "Do I really have choices, or do I just have survival?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility and fear, hope and heartbreak. Outside, the sun was setting over Driftwood Cove, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and dreams, 3 broken souls began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they could heal each other. The next morning brought Detective Rivera to Sage's hospital room, his weathered face kind but serious as he pulled out a small notebook. Caspian tensed immediately. Police meant questions, investigations, the kind of scrutiny that might drive Kaia away before they'd even begun to understand what was happening between them. "Just routine follow-up on the yacht accident," Detective Rivera assured them. "Coast Guard found debris about 4 miles offshore. Looks like you hit some unexpected weather." "That's right," Caspian said carefully. "Storm came out of nowhere." "And you, young lady," Rivera turned to Kaia, who had spent the night curled in the uncomfortable hospital chair, refusing all offers to find her somewhere else to sleep. "You're the one who found them?" Kaia nodded, her expression guarded. "Around dawn. On the South Beach. Lucky thing. Few more hours and the tide would have." Rivera didn't finish the sentence, but they all understood. "You did good, kid. Real good." As Rivera continued his questions, Sage reached for something on her bedside table, a small, waterlogged object that the nurses had found in her pocket. It was a bracelet, silver with a small charm in the shape of a phoenix, its surface tarnished by salt water. "What's that, sweetheart?" Caspian asked. "I found it," Sage said, holding up the bracelet. "In the water, right before everything went dark. I grabbed it because it was pretty." Kaia went completely still, her face draining of color. Her hand moved instinctively to her wrist, where a pale band of skin showed where something had once been worn constantly. "Where did you find that?" Kaia's voice was barely a whisper. "Floating near us," Sage said innocently. "Why? Do you know whose it is?" Kaia's hands were shaking now. She reached out slowly, as if the bracelet might disappear if she moved too quickly. "It's mine. It was my brother's, actually. He gave it to me before." She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The pain in her voice said everything. "Your brother?" Caspian asked gently. "Phoenix." The name came out like a prayer. "He was 9. I was 10. We were living in a foster home near the coast, and the older kids dared him to swim out to the rocks during a storm." Her voice was flat now, emotionless, the way people spoke when the pain was too deep for tears. "I tried to stop him, tried to go after him. But I wasn't strong enough, wasn't fast enough." The silence in the room was deafening. Even Detective Rivera had stopped writing, his pen frozen over his notebook. "The current took him," Kaia continued. "I screamed for help, but by the time the adults came, he was gone. They found his body 3 days later, washed up on a beach 20 miles away." She took the bracelet from Sage with trembling fingers. "He was wearing this when they found him. The social worker gave it to me afterward. Said it was all I had left of him." "But how did it end up in the water where we were?" Sage asked, her young mind struggling to understand the impossible coincidence. Kaia's laugh was bitter, broken. "Because I threw it away. Last night, Before I found you. I was standing on the rocks where Phoenix died, and I couldn't carry it anymore. The weight of it, the guilt. I threw it as far as I could into the ocean. Caspian felt something cold settle in his stomach. You were on the rocks last night? During the storm. Kaia's silence was answer enough. Kaia, he said carefully, what were you doing out there? She looked at him then, and he saw something in her eyes that made his heart stop. The same look he'd seen in his own mirror during the darkest days after Celeste's death. The look of someone who'd given up. I was saying goodbye, she said simply. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Sage's eyes filled with tears, and Caspian felt his chest tighten with a pain that had nothing to do with his own grief. To Phoenix, Sage whispered. To everything. Kaia's voice was steady, but her hands were still shaking. I was tired, Sage. Tired of being hungry, tired of being alone, tired of carrying all this guilt around like a stone in my chest. I thought maybe if I just let go, maybe I could find him again. But you didn't, Caspian said, and there was something fierce in his voice. You didn't let go. No, Kaia said, looking at the bracelet in her hands. Because the ocean gave me something else to hold on to instead. It gave me you. The truth of it settled over them like a revelation. The storm that had nearly killed Caspian and Sage had also saved Kaia's life, pulling her back from the edge of despair and giving her a purpose she'd thought she'd lost forever. Phoenix sent us to you, Sage said with the absolute certainty of childhood. He knew you needed saving too. Kaia's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she clutched the bracelet to her chest. I miss him so much. Every day I miss him. I know, Caspian said softly, moving to sit on the edge of her chair. I know exactly how that feels. And he did. The guilt, the what-ifs, the crushing weight of feeling responsible for someone else's death. He'd carried it all since Celeste died. The knowledge that if he'd insisted she see a doctor sooner, if he'd paid more attention to her symptoms, if he'd been a better husband. Celeste used to say that grief was love with nowhere to go, he said quietly. That the pain we feel when someone dies is just all the love we still have for them, with no way to express it. Kaia looked at him through her tears. How do you live with it? Some days I don't know, he admitted. But I'm learning that maybe the love doesn't have to have nowhere to go. Maybe we can give it to other people who need it. Detective Rivera cleared his throat softly. I think I have everything I need for my report, he said, closing his notebook. You folks take care of each other. After he left, the three of them sat in silence, the weight of shared grief and unexpected hope settling around them like a blanket. Sage reached for both their hands, her small fingers linking them together. We're all broken, she said with the wisdom of a child who'd seen too much. But maybe broken things can fit together better than whole ones. Kaia squeezed her hand, then looked at Caspian. Your daughter is very wise. She gets that from her mother, Caspian said. But I think she's getting some of it from you too. Outside, the sun was climbing higher, burning off the morning fog and revealing a day full of possibilities. And in room 314 of Driftwood Cove General Hospital, three souls who'd been drowning in their separate griefs began to discover that sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to choose to live together. 3 days later, Sage was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions to rest and avoid strenuous activity. Caspian had arranged for a suite at the Driftwood Cove Resort while they waited for insurance adjusters and Coast Guard investigators to finish their work. What he hadn't expected was for Kaia to disappear the moment they left the hospital. Where did she go? Sage asked for the 100th time, pressing her face against the hotel window that overlooked the beach. She promised she wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. Caspian had been wondering the same thing. One moment Kaia had been walking beside them toward the hotel, the next she'd vanished like smoke. He'd spent 2 hours searching the beach, the cafe, even the shelter where Mama Cordelia said she sometimes stayed. Nothing. Maybe she just needed some time to think, he said, though his own worry was growing by the hour. Or maybe she thinks we don't really want her, Sage said with devastating insight. Maybe she thinks we were just being nice because she saved us. The possibility hit Caspian like a punch to the gut. In his world, gratitude was often expressed through money, gifts, formal gestures. But Kaia lived in a different world, one where kindness was rare and usually came with strings attached. "We have to find her," Sage said, turning from the window with determination. "We have to show her we mean it. Sweetheart, the doctor said you need to rest." "I can rest later. Kaia needs us now." There was something in his daughter's voice, a strength and certainty he hadn't heard since before Celeste died. For 2 years, Sage had been quiet, careful, walking on eggshells around his grief. But now she was fighting for something she believed in, and Caspian realized this was the most alive she'd seemed in months. "Okay," he said. "Let's go find her." They found Kaia 2 hours later, sitting on the rocks where she'd thrown Phoenix's bracelet into the sea. She was wearing the same clothes from the hospital, her knees drawn up to her chest, staring out at the waves with an expression of profound loneliness. "There you are," Sage called out, scrambling over the rocks with more energy than she'd shown since the accident. "We've been looking everywhere for you." Kaia turned, surprise flickering across her face. "You were looking for me?" "Of course we were," Caspian said, settling carefully on the rocks beside her. "You disappeared. We were worried. I thought—" Kaia's voice was small. "I thought maybe you'd realized this was all crazy. Rich man, homeless kid, it doesn't make sense." "Since when does family have to make sense?" Sage asked, plopping down on Kaia's other side with the casual confidence of childhood. "Family." Kaia's voice cracked on the word. "That's what we are, isn't it?" Sage looked between them with innocent certainty. "We saved each other. That makes us family." Kaia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers worrying the Phoenix bracelet she now wore again. "I don't know how to be family," she said finally. "I don't know the rules." "There are no rules," Caspian said gently. "Just showing up, being there, caring about each other. I've never had anyone care about me before. Not really." The admission came out barely above a whisper. "What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good enough?" Sage reached over and took Kaia's hand. "You saved my life. You held me when I was scared. You made my daddy smile for the first time in forever. How is that not good enough?" Kaia looked at Caspian in surprise. "I made you smile." "You made me remember what it felt like to hope," he said honestly. "Watching you with Sage, seeing how much you care about her, it reminded me what I'd been missing. What we'd both been missing." "I don't understand." Caspian chose his words carefully. "After Celeste died, I threw myself into work because it was easier than dealing with the pain. I thought I was protecting Sage by not talking about her mother, by trying to keep things normal. But I was really just protecting myself." "You were scared," Kaia said with understanding. "Scared that if you let yourself feel it, it would destroy you." "Yes. But watching you fight for Sage's life, seeing how much you were willing to risk for someone you just met, it made me realize I'd been so afraid of losing her that I'd already lost her. I'd lost myself too." Sage leaned against Kaia's shoulder. "Mama used to say that love isn't about holding on tight. It's about holding on right." "Your mama was very smart," Kaia said softly. "She would have liked you," Sage said with certainty. "She always said the best people are the ones who help others even when they're hurting themselves." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the waves roll in and out. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I'm scared," Kaia said suddenly. "Of what?" Caspian asked. "Of wanting this too much. Of believing it's real and then having it taken away." Her voice was raw with vulnerability. "Everyone I've ever loved has left me. My parents, Phoenix, every foster family that decided I was too much trouble. What if you change your minds? What if we don't? Sage countered. What if this is real and you miss it because you're too scared to try? Kaia looked at this wise, brave little girl who'd somehow become the center of her world in just a few days. When did you get so smart? I learned from the best, Sage said, squeezing her hand. I learned from you. Caspian felt his throat tighten with emotion. Kaia, I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen. I can't promise that we won't make mistakes or that it will always be easy. But I can promise that we won't give up on you. Not ever. How can you be so sure? Because you're already family, he said simply. You became family the moment you chose to save us instead of walking away. Everything else is just paperwork. Kaia was crying now, tears streaming down her face as years of loneliness and fear finally found release. Sage wrapped her arms around her, and Caspian pulled them both close, creating a circle of warmth and safety against the growing darkness. I want to try, Kaia whispered. I want to be brave enough to try. You're the bravest person I know, Sage said fiercely. And you're not alone anymore. You'll never be alone again. As the stars began to appear overhead, 3 hearts that had been broken by loss began to heal through love. And on the rocks where Kaia had once contemplated ending her story, she instead chose to begin a new chapter. One filled with hope, belonging, and the radical possibility that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. The call came at 7 in the morning, shattering the fragile peace they'd built over the past week. Caspian's phone buzzed insistently on the hotel nightstand, and he answered it with the groggy confusion of someone who'd finally been sleeping well for the first time in years. Caspian, thank God. The voice belonged to Margaret Thornfield, his head of legal affairs, and she sounded frantic. Where the hell are you? The board is in emergency session, the stock price is tanking, and there are reporters camped outside your house asking about some homeless girl you've supposedly adopted. Caspian sat up abruptly, his blood turning to ice. In the adjoining room, he could hear Sage and Kaia's quiet laughter as they shared breakfast, a sound that had become as essential to him as breathing. What are you talking about? He asked, though he already knew. Somehow, their story had leaked. Social media is exploding with photos of you and some street kid at the hospital. The headlines are calling it everything from Billionaire's charity case to Blackwood's publicity stunt. The board wants answers. Caspian. Now. Through the connecting door, Caspian could see Kaia helping Sage braid her hair, their heads bent together in concentration. They looked so natural together, so right, that the idea of this moment being destroyed by corporate politics made him physically sick. I'll call you back, he said, hanging up before Margaret could protest. But the damage was already done. Within an hour, reporters had found the hotel. Caspian watched from the window as news vans lined the street below, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical vultures. Daddy! Sage appeared in the doorway, her face pale with confusion. There are people with cameras outside. They're asking the hotel staff about Kaia. Kaia emerged behind her, and Caspian could see the exact moment she understood what was happening. Her expression shuddered, walls slamming back into place with devastating efficiency. I should go, she said quietly. No. The word came out sharper than Caspian intended. This isn't your fault. It's mine. I should have anticipated this, should have protected you better. Protected me from what? The truth. Kaia's laugh was bitter. I am a homeless street kid. I am a charity case. That's exactly what I am. That's not what you are to us, Sage said fiercely, but Kaia was already moving toward her backpack. Sage, sweetheart, you don't understand how this works, Kaia said, her voice gentle but final. Your daddy has a company to run, a reputation to protect. He can't afford to be associated with someone like me. Someone like you? Caspian's voice was dangerous now. What exactly does that mean? Poor. Black. Damaged. Each word was a knife thrust. The kind of person who makes rich white men look bad in the newspapers. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Caspian felt something crack inside his chest. Not just hurt, but rage at a world that had taught this brilliant, brave child to see herself as less than worthy. "Is that really what you think of me?" he asked quietly. "That I care more about my reputation than I do about you?" Kaia's hand stilled on her backpack. "Don't you?" Before Caspian could answer, his phone rang again. Margaret's name flashed on the screen, and he could see Kaia watching, waiting for him to choose between her and his corporate responsibilities. He declined the call. "Kaia, look at me." When she didn't, he moved closer. "Look at me." Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. "I don't give a damn what the newspapers say. I don't care what the board thinks or what the stock price does. You are not a charity case or a publicity stunt. You are my daughter's sister. You are part of this family. But your company is just a company. You and Sage are my life." The words seemed to hit Kaia like a physical blow. For a moment, hope flickered in her eyes. Then her phone buzzed with a text message, and everything changed. She looked at the screen and went completely white. "What is it?" Caspian asked. Wordlessly, Kaia handed him the phone. The message was from an unknown number, but the attached photo made his blood run cold. It showed Kaia climbing out of a dumpster behind a restaurant, her clothes dirty, her face gaunt with hunger. The timestamp was from just 2 weeks ago. The accompanying text was brutal. "Thought you should see what your new daughter really is. A thief and a liar who's been arrested 3 times for shoplifting. Check the juvenile records. She's playing you for a fool." "Kaia," Caspian said carefully, "is this true?" The question shattered something in her eyes. "You mean am I a thief?" "Yes. I've stolen food when I was starving. I've taken clothes when mine were falling apart. I've lied to social workers and police and anyone else who wanted to put me back in the system." Her voice was rising now, pain and anger bleeding through. "Is that what you want to hear? That I'm exactly what they say I am? That's not what I—" "Yes, it is." Tears were streaming down her face now. "You want to know if I'm good enough for your perfect family. If I'm clean enough, respectable enough, worthy enough. Well, I'm not. I'm a street kid who's done whatever it takes to survive, and I always will be." "Kaia, please." "No." She grabbed her backpack, shoving the few belongings she'd accumulated into it with violent efficiency. "I was stupid to think this could work. People like me don't get happy endings. We get used up and thrown away when we become inconvenient." Sage started crying, reaching for Kaia with desperate hands. "Don't go. Please don't go. I don't care what anyone says about you." "You will," Kaia said, her voice breaking. "When you're older, when you understand how the world really works, you'll be ashamed that you ever knew me." "That's not true," Caspian said, but Kaia was already at the door. "Goodbye, Sage," she whispered. "Remember what I told you about being brave. And remember that someone loved you enough to die for you. That's more than most people get." "Kaia, wait." But she was gone, slipping out the door and disappearing into the crowd of reporters like she'd never existed at all. Sage's sobs filled the room, and Caspian felt his own heart breaking as he realized he'd failed them both. His phone rang again. This time, he answered. "Margaret, whatever the board wants, tell them." "Caspian, listen to me. The girl's juvenile record just leaked. 3 arrests, multiple foster home placements, a history of running away. The media is having a field day. You need to distance yourself from this situation immediately." Through the window, Caspian could see Kaia pushing through the crowd of reporters, their cameras flashing like lightning as they shouted questions at her retreating form. She looked so small, so alone, so utterly defeated. "Sir." Margaret's voice was insistent. "Are you listening? We need to do damage control now." Caspian watched until Kaia disappeared around a corner, taking his heart with her. Then he hung up the phone and pulled his sobbing daughter into his arms, wondering how he'd managed to lose the most important thing in his life twice in one lifetime. Have you ever had to choose between what others expected of you and what your heart knew was right? Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight against our own fears. What would you have done in Caspian's place? Share your thoughts below. For 3 days, Caspian Blackwood sat in his hotel suite and watched his empire crumble on live television. The stock price had dropped 12%. 2 major clients had pulled their contracts. The board of directors was demanding his resignation. Every news channel ran the same story on repeat: Billionaire's bizarre adoption scandal, with photos of Kaia looking desperate and hunted as she fled through the crowd of reporters. But none of that mattered as much as the sight of his daughter, curled in the window seat, staring out at the beach where she'd first met the girl who'd saved her life. Sage hadn't spoken since Kaia left. She ate when forced, slept fitfully, and spent her waking hours watching the waves as if she could will Kaia to emerge from them again. The light had gone out of her eyes, and Caspian recognized the look. It was the same hollow expression she'd worn for months after her mother died. "The board meeting is in an hour," Margaret said, her voice crackling through the phone. "If you don't show up, they'll vote you out anyway. At least this way you can control the narrative." Caspian looked at his daughter's reflection in the window, pale, silent, broken. "What narrative would that be, Margaret? That you were temporarily overcome by grief and gratitude. That you made an impulsive decision to help the girl who saved Sage, but you've come to your senses. That Blackwood Enterprises remains committed to responsible corporate citizenship, not reckless charity cases." The words made him physically sick. "Is that what you think she was? A charity case? Caspian, I understand you feel grateful to her, but look at the facts. Multiple arrests, a history of theft, no family, no stability. She was using you. She saved my daughter's life. And you tried to help her. That's admirable. But you can't sacrifice everything you've built for one troubled child." Caspian closed his eyes, remembering Kaia's face when she'd handed him that text message. The way hope had died in her eyes when he'd asked if the accusations were true. He'd meant it as concern, but she'd heard it as judgment. And maybe, in that moment of shock and fear, it had been. "Sir." Margaret's voice was insistent. "The car is waiting downstairs. You need to make a decision." Through the window, Caspian could see Mama Cordelia's cafe in the distance. He'd driven by it twice in the past 3 days, hoping to catch a glimpse of Kaia, but she was gone. Vanished as completely as if the ocean had swallowed her. "Daddy!" Sage's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you going to the meeting?" It was the first time she'd spoken since Kaia left, and the question carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. "I don't know, sweetheart. Mama wouldn't have gone." The words hit him like a physical blow. Sage was right. Celeste would have told the board exactly where they could shove their ultimatum. She would have fought for Kaia with everything she had. Consequences be damned. "What do you think I should do?" he asked. Sage turned from the window, and for the first time in days, there was fire in her eyes. "I think you should find her. I think you should tell her you're sorry. I think you should bring her home. It's not that simple, Sage. The company is just money." Sage's voice was fierce now, channeling the strength Kaia had taught her. "Kaia is family, and family doesn't give up on family." Caspian stared at his 8-year-old daughter, seeing Celeste's unwavering moral compass shining through her. When had Sage become so wise? When had she learned to see so clearly through the noise to what really mattered? "The board will fire me," he said quietly. So we'll lose everything. The house, the money, the security. We already lost everything that mattered when Kaia left." Sage's eyes filled with tears. "I don't care about the house or the money. I care about her. She's my sister, Daddy. She's the first person since Mama died who made me feel like I wasn't broken." The truth of it settled over Caspian like a revelation. For 2 years, He'd been so focused on providing for Sage financially that he'd forgotten to provide for her emotionally. He'd given her everything money could buy, but nothing her heart actually needed. Kaia had given her hope, laughter, the feeling of being truly seen and valued. In 3 days, she'd done more for Sage than Caspian had managed in 2 years. His phone buzzed with another text from Margaret. "Car is here. Board meeting starts in 30 minutes. This is your last chance to save the company." Caspian looked at the message, then at his daughter, then out at the ocean that had brought them all together. He thought about Celeste, about what she would say if she could see him now. He thought about Kaia, alone somewhere in the world, believing she wasn't worthy of love. He thought about the man he'd been before grief had hollowed him out, and the man he wanted to be for his daughter. Then he deleted Margaret's message and turned off his phone. "Get your jacket, sweetheart," he said, standing up with sudden purpose. "We're going to find our girl." Sage's face lit up like sunrise. "Really? Really? But first, I need to make a stop." 20 minutes later, Caspian walked into the Driftwood Cove police station with Sage at his side. Detective Rivera looked up from his desk with surprise. "Mr. Blackwood? Is everything all right?" "I need to find Kaia Solace," Caspian said without preamble. "And I need your help." Rivera's expression grew concerned. "Is she in trouble?" "No," Caspian said firmly. "I am. I let fear and other people's opinions drive away the most important person in my daughter's life. And I need to fix it before it's too late." Rivera studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I might know where she is. But Mr. Blackwood, the media attention, your company." "Can all go to hell," Caspian said with quiet conviction. "My family is more important than my reputation." As they left the station with Rivera's information, Sage slipped her hand into her father's. "I'm proud of you, Daddy. I should have done this 3 days ago. But you're doing it now. That's what matters." Caspian squeezed her hand, feeling something shift inside his chest. For the first time since Celeste died, he was choosing love over fear, family over fortune. It was terrifying and liberating and absolutely right. Now he just had to pray it wasn't too late. They found Kaia at the lighthouse. The old structure stood sentinel at the edge of Driftwood Cove, its paint peeling and windows boarded up, abandoned for decades but still standing against the endless assault of wind and waves. Detective Rivera had mentioned it as one of the places homeless kids sometimes sheltered, and something in Caspian's gut told him this was where she'd go, somewhere high and isolated, where she could see the ocean that had taken everything from her and given her everything back. The climb up the rusted spiral staircase was treacherous, each step groaning under their weight. Sage insisted on coming despite Caspian's protests, her small hand gripping the railing with determination that reminded him painfully of her mother. They found Kaia on the observation deck, sitting with her back against the lighthouse lens, staring out at the endless expanse of water. She looked smaller than ever in clothes that were too big for her dark hair whipping in the salt wind. The Phoenix bracelet caught the late afternoon light on her wrist. She didn't turn when they reached the top, though Caspian knew she'd heard them coming. "Go away," she said quietly. "Haven't you done enough damage?" "Kaia." Sage's voice was soft, tentative. "We came to bring you home." "I don't have a home." Kaia's voice was flat, emotionless. "I never did. I was stupid to think I could." Caspian moved carefully around to face her, his heart breaking at the sight of tear tracks on her cheeks. "You're right," he said. "You don't have a home. We destroyed that when we let you walk away." Kaia looked up at him then, surprise flickering in her dark eyes. "I failed you," Caspian continued, settling cross-legged on the weathered deck. "When that text came, when I asked if it was true, I wasn't questioning your character. I was scared. Scared that someone would try to take you away from us. Scared that I didn't know how to protect you from a world that's been cruel to you your whole life." "It doesn't matter," Kaia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It matters to me." Sage sat down beside her, close enough to touch but not quite daring to. It matters because you're my sister, and sisters don't give up on each other. I'm not your sister, Sage. I'm nobody. I'm exactly what those reporters said. A street kid with a criminal record who doesn't belong in your world. You're wrong. Caspian's voice was steady, certain. You want to know what you are. You're the girl who saved my daughter's life without thinking twice about the cost. You're the person who taught me how to be a father again. You're the one who brought light back into our lives when we thought we'd lost it forever. Kaia shook her head. Your company is gone. The words came out matter of fact, without regret. The board voted me out this morning. Stock price crashed. I'm officially no longer a billionaire. Kaia stared at him in shock. Because of me? Because of my choice, Caspian corrected. Because I chose family over money, love over reputation. And I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. But you've lost everything. No. Sage's voice was fierce. We lost everything when you left. The money doesn't matter. The big house doesn't matter. You matter. Kaia was crying now, tears streaming down her face as years of believing she was worthless crashed against the reality of being truly, unconditionally loved. I stole food, she whispered. I lied to police officers. I've done things I'm not proud of just to survive. And I've spent 2 years hiding from my grief instead of helping my daughter heal from hers, Caspian said. We've all done things we're not proud of. That doesn't make us unworthy of love. I don't know how to be part of a family, Kaia said, her voice breaking. I don't know the rules. There's only one rule, Sage said, reaching for Kaia's hand. We don't give up on each other. Ever. Kaia looked down at their joined hands, small and pale, small and dark, but fitting together perfectly. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good enough? Then we'll figure it out together, Caspian said. That's what families do. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of salt and possibility. Below, the waves crashed against the rocks where Kaia had once thrown away her brother's bracelet, where she'd contemplated ending her story. But here now, surrounded by love she'd never dared to hope for, she was choosing to begin again. I'm scared, she admitted. So are we, Caspian said honestly. But we're scared together. And that makes all the difference. Kaia looked between them, this man who'd given up everything for her, this little girl who'd claimed her as family from the moment they met. She thought about Phoenix, about the love that had nowhere to go, and realized maybe Caspian was right. Maybe love didn't have to have nowhere to go. Maybe it could flow forward, to new people who needed it just as much. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I want to try. Sage threw her arms around Kaia with a sob of relief, and Caspian wrapped them both in his embrace. They sat there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, 3 broken souls who'd found wholeness in each other. So what happens now? Kaia asked eventually. Now we go home, Caspian said. To our real home. The one we make together. Where will that be? Caspian smiled, thinking of the small house he'd already put a deposit on. Nothing fancy, but big enough for a family of 3 and close enough to the ocean that they could hear the waves at night. Wherever we are together, he said simply. As they made their way down from the lighthouse, Sage chattering excitedly about all the things they'd do together, Kaia touched the Phoenix bracelet on her wrist. She could almost hear Phoenix's voice on the wind, telling her it was okay to let go of the guilt, okay to choose happiness, okay to believe she deserved love. The ocean had taken her brother, but it had also brought her a family. And sometimes, Kaia thought as she watched Sage skip ahead of them, sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to choose to live. Fully, bravely, and surrounded by love. What does family mean to you? Sometimes the people who choose to love us heal us more than those bound by blood. Have you ever found unexpected family in your life? Share your story below. Every comment reminds us that love really can conquer all.